The humid air of a Georgia summer clung to my skin like a second layer of sweat. But the chill inside my chest had nothing to do with the weather. I was standing in the marble foyer of the Sterling Manor, a house I had spent every waking hour of the last 2 years paying for, watching my sister Vanessa have a literal meltdown over a centerpiece. "Silas, where is the catering lead?" Vanessa shrieked, her voice hitting a frequency that could shatter glass. She was draped in a 5-figure designer robe, her golden child energy radiating off her like a heat wave. "The lilies are off-white, not ivory. Do you want to ruin the most important day of my life?" I took a deep breath, clutching a small velvet box in my pocket. Inside was a pair of diamond earrings I'd spent 6 months of overtime to buy as her wedding gift. I'd just come off a double shift at the engineering firm, my bones aching, my eyes stinging from lack of sleep. "Vanessa, I just walked through the door," I said, my voice low. "The caterers are in the back. I'll go check, but can we just—" "Don't can we me," she snapped, pointing a manicured finger at my chest. "You look like a hobo. My fiance's family is coming from Greenwich. They're old money, Silas. Real money. If they see you looking like a grease monkey, they'll think we're some backwoods charity case." I felt the familiar sting of being the family's useful ghost. I was the one who worked the 80-hour weeks so Mom could keep her country club membership and Vanessa could have her dream wedding to a trust fund frat boy named Preston. They didn't know or didn't care that I was the one who had quietly stepped in when the bank was 48 hours away from foreclosing on this very house 2 years ago. To them, I was just the boring, dependable ATM with a pulse. My mother Eleanor stepped out of the parlor, a glass of Chardonnay already in her hand at 10 a.m. She didn't look at me with concern for my exhaustion. She looked at me with clinical disgust. "Silas, thank God you're here," she said, though her tone suggested otherwise. "The valet company had a last-minute cancellation. I need you to put on a vest and handle the cars. And once the ceremony starts, stay in the kitchen. We told Preston's parents we told them you're the property manager." The velvet box felt like a hot coal in my pocket. "The property manager? Mom, I'm your son. I'm the one who paid off the mortgage on this place." Eleanor sighed, the sound of a woman inconvenienced by reality. "Silas, don't be dramatic. It's just for one day. We need to maintain the image. Vanessa is marrying a Vance. Do you have any idea what that does for our social standing? You're a smart boy, but you're unpolished. You don't fit the aesthetic of a high society wedding." "The aesthetic?" I laughed, a jagged, hollow sound. "I'm the reason there's a roof over your heads. I've been living in a cramped studio apartment near the docks just so you two could keep this mansion. And now you want me to park cars and hide in the kitchen like a dirty secret?" Vanessa stepped closer, her eyes narrowing. "You're so selfish, Silas. You're always making it about you. You're just jealous because Preston is everything you'll never be. He's a winner. You're just the help. Honestly, Mom's right. If you can't play the part, maybe you shouldn't be here at all." "Fine," I said, the ice in my chest finally solidifying. "You want me to be the help? You want me to be the property manager? I can do that. But you might want to remember one thing about property managers. They're the ones who hold the keys." "Is that a threat?" Eleanor hissed. "After everything we've done for you? After we took you in when your father died?" "You didn't take me in," I replied. my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. You used my inheritance to pay for Vanessa's private school, and then you used my salary to keep up a lifestyle you couldn't afford. I stayed because I thought family meant something, but I see now I'm just a tool to you, and tools can be taken back. Get out, Vanessa screamed, pointing toward the door. I don't want your loser energy anywhere near my wedding. Get out of this house. It's our house, and you're no longer welcome. Is that your final answer, Vanessa? I asked, looking at my mother. Eleanor just turned away, taking a long sip of her wine. Silence was her approval. Fine, I said, reaching into my pocket. I didn't pull out the earrings. I pulled out my phone and sent a single text to my attorney. Execute the termination of the occupancy agreement for 42 Shadow Creek, effective immediately. Serve them during the rehearsal dinner. I looked at Vanessa, who was already turning back to the mirror, admiring her own reflection. Don't worry, I said, walking toward the door. I'll be out in 5 minutes. But you should probably start looking for a new venue, and maybe a new place to live, because as of 60 seconds ago, the property manager just quit, and the owner, well, he's not feeling very generous anymore. I walked out into the sweltering Georgia sun, the heavy oak doors thudding shut behind me. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel the weight of their expectations. I felt light. I felt dangerous. They wanted a show. I was going to give them a finale they'd never forget. The interior of my beat-up Ford F-150 felt like a sanctuary compared to the suffocating opulence of Sterling Manor. I sat in the driver's seat, my hands trembling, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of finally cutting the cord. I watched through the rearview mirror as the heavy oak doors remained shut. No one ran out to apologize. No one called my name. They were already back to obsessing over silk linens and shrimp cocktails, convinced that I was just throwing a tantrum. I pulled out of the driveway, the gravel crunching under my tires like the sound of a bridge burning. 10 minutes later, I was pulling into the parking lot of a nondescript office building in downtown Savannah. Silas, Marcus, my attorney, said as I walked into his office. He didn't look surprised to see me. He had been the one to help me set up the shell company, Aegis Holdings, when I bought the house back from the bank's shadow inventory 2 years ago. I got your text. Are you sure about this? Once the sheriff serves these papers at the rehearsal dinner tonight, there's no unringing that bell. They called me the help, Marcus, I said, dropping into a leather chair. I felt a cold, jagged edge in my voice that I didn't recognize. They told me to park cars and hide in the kitchen because I don't fit the Vance aesthetic. My mother stood there and let Vanessa call me a stray dog. They think they own the stage, but they forgot who bought the theater. Marcus sighed, leaning back. Legally, you're in the clear. The occupancy agreement I drafted was a courtesy. It allowed them to reside at 42 Shadow Creek as long as they maintained the property and didn't interfere with the owner's interests. Kicking the owner out of his own house? That's a material breach of the most basic level. I've already contacted the sheriff's department. They'll be there at 7 p.m. I spent the next few hours in a fog of cold productivity. I didn't go back to my cramped studio. Instead, I checked into a high-end hotel overlooking the river, a place the Millers could only afford if I was signing the checks. I took a long, hot shower, scrubbing the construction dust and the smell of their entitlement off my skin. as I dressed in a suit that actually fit, a bespoke charcoal piece I'd bought for myself but never had the heart to wear around them for fear of showing up Leo. My phone began to vibrate. 14 missed calls. Eleanor, Mom. 22 missed calls. Vanessa. 6 text messages. Preston, the fiancé. I opened the text from Preston first. It was classic trust fund bravado. Listen, Silas. Vanessa is hysterical. I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but you need to man up and apologize. This is a Vance wedding. We don't do drama. Fix this, or I'll make sure you never work in this state again. I smiled, a thin, predatory expression. Preston Vance was the kind of guy who thought a LinkedIn premium account and a daddy with a yacht made him a king. He had no idea that his high society bride was essentially a squatter. I ignored the messages and headed down to the hotel bar. I ordered a neat bourbon, the expensive stuff, and waited. At 7:15 p.m., the dam broke. My phone didn't just vibrate, it exploded. I sat there, sipping my drink, watching the screen light up with the carnage. I finally picked up when my mother called for the 5th time in a row. Silas! Her voice was a shrill, panicked mess, stripped of its usual Southern Belle polish. There is a man here, a man in a uniform. He just walked into the middle of the rehearsal dinner, in front of the Vances, Silas, in front of everyone. He handed Vanessa a stack of papers and told us we have 72 hours to vacate the premises. He called it an eviction. Tell me this is a mistake. It's not a mistake, Eleanor, I said, my voice as smooth as the bourbon in my glass. I told you this morning. The property manager quit, and the owner? He's exercising his right to reclaim his property. You can't do this! Vanessa's voice screamed in the background, muffled but clear. Preston's parents are right here. They're asking why the sheriff is at our house. You're ruining my life. Actually, Vanessa, I replied, I'm just stopping the subsidy. You wanted a Vance wedding, right? Well, the Vances are old money. I'm sure they'll be happy to pay for your new housing. Since you think Preston is such a winner, I'm sure he's already offered to put you up in a penthouse. Silas, please, Eleanor whimpered, her voice cracking. We have nowhere to go. All the wedding gifts are here. The catering equipment is set up in the garden. We'll be the laughingstock of the city. You should have thought about the aesthetic before you told me to park cars, Mom, I said. You wanted me to be invisible. Well, I'm gone, along with the electricity, the water, and the internet, which are all scheduled to be disconnected tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. Since I'm the account holder, I didn't see the point in paying for services I'm not using. You're a monster, Vanessa wailed, her voice fading as someone, likely Preston, took the phone. Silas, listen to me. Preston's voice was no longer arrogant. It was desperate. We can settle this. I'll write you a check. Just call off the eviction so we can get through the weekend. Name your price. My price, I chuckled. Preston, you're a Vance. You should know that some things aren't for sale, like my dignity or my house. You have 3 days. I suggest you start packing the silver. Oh, wait, the silver belongs to the estate too. Better just stick to your clothes. I hung up and turned my phone off. The bar was quiet, the jazz music soft in the background. For years, I had been the silent foundation of their vanity. I had carried the weight of their lies until my back was ready to snap. Now, the foundation was gone, and I wanted to see if they could actually fly, or if they just hit the ground like everyone else. I finished my drink and signaled the bartender for the check. "Is everything all right, sir?" he asked, noticing the cold look in my eyes. "Perfect," I said, laying down $100 bill. "I just realized I'm a very good property manager. I finally got rid of the pests." I walked out of the bar and toward the elevators. The rehearsal dinner was over. The Vance wedding was officially a disaster. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one who had to fix it. The morning sun hit the Savannah River with a blinding glint, but inside my hotel suite, the atmosphere was as still as a grave. I woke up at 7:55 a.m., pouring a cup of black coffee and sitting by the window. I wasn't watching the river, I was watching the clock. At exactly 8 a.m., I knew the hum of the central AC at 42 Shadow Creek would die. The high-speed fiber optic lines would go dark. The faucets would cough once and then run dry. It was the ultimate FU in the digital age. In a $2 million mansion, you're only as elite as your utility bill says you are. My phone, which I had switched back on, began a rhythmic dance of notifications. It wasn't just my family anymore. The Vance machine was starting to grind its gears. A call came in from an unknown number. I answered. "Silas, this is Julian Vance Sr., a voice boomed, deep, authoritative, and accustomed to being obeyed. Preston's father was the kind of man who owned half the commercial real estate in Georgia. I'm currently standing in your mother's foyer, and it is 80 degrees and rising. My wife is currently having a panic attack because she can't flush a toilet. We need to talk. Now." "Mr. Vance," I said, leaning back, "I'm surprised you're still there. I assumed the Vances would have relocated to the Hyatt by now, once the sheriff made the situation clear." "Listen to me, son," Vance hissed, his tone shifting from authoritative to predatory. "I don't know what kind of sibling rivalry bullshit is going on here, but my family's reputation is on the line. We have 300 guests arriving tomorrow. The governor is on the guest list. I'll buy the damn house from you right now. Name a price, triple the market value, and turn the water back on." "It's not for sale, Julian," I replied. I felt a strange power in using his first name. "And it's not about the money. Your son told me last night that Vances don't do drama. Well, Silas Miller doesn't do disrespect. My mother and sister told the world I was the hired help. They used me as an interest-free loan for years while they laughed at my unpolished lifestyle. So consider this a lesson in property management." "You're playing a dangerous game, Miller," Vance warned. "I can tie you up in litigation for the next decade. I'll make sure you never get a permit to build so much as a birdhouse in this state." "Go ahead," I challenged. "I'm an engineer. I'm used to building things from scratch. But you're trying to build a wedding on a foundation of lies. If you want to save your reputation, I suggest you get your son and his property manager bride out of my house before the moving trucks arrive at noon." I hung up before he could respond. 2 hours later, Marcus sent me a video clip from a doorbell camera I'd installed months ago. It was pure, unadulterated chaos. A fleet of black SUVs was lined up in the driveway. Preston's parents were the first to flee, their designer luggage being tossed into trunks by disgruntled valets who realized they weren't getting paid. Then came the explosion. Vanessa emerged from the front door, still wearing her bride-to-be sash, but her hair was a frizzy mess from the humidity, and her makeup was smeared with tears. She was screaming at Preston, who was trying to shove a giant wedding cake box into the back of a convertible. "You promised me a fairy tale," she wailed, her voice cracking over the wind. "You said the Vances were powerful. Why can't your father fix this?" "Fix what, Vanessa?" Preston roared back, finally snapping. "The house isn't even yours. My dad just found out your family is flat broke and living on Silas's charity. The merger is off. My father is pulling the funding for the entire ceremony. Do you have any idea how much of an idiot I look like right now?" "But I love you." "You love the Vance name." Preston shoved the last bag in and hopped into the driver's seat. "Good luck with the eviction, Vanessa. Don't call me." He peeled out, kicking up gravel that pelted the very house she had tried to kick me out of. I watched the video 3 times. It was the most honest conversation they had ever had. By 1 p.m., I decided to make a final appearance. I drove my truck back to Shadow Creek. The gates were open. The lawn was littered with discarded decorations and empty champagne bottles from the night before. It looked like a war zone. I walked into the house. It was silent, save for the sound of someone sobbing in the parlor. I found my mother sitting on a floral sofa, surrounded by half-packed boxes of her expensive china, most of which was actually bought with my 2022 Christmas bonus. She looked up, her face aged 10 years and 24 hours. "Silas, you've destroyed us. The Vances are gone. The social club called. They've suspended my membership because of the public disturbance. We have nowhere to go." "You have the apartment I've been living in," I said, tossing a set of keys onto the coffee table. "It's 40 minutes away, near the docks. The rent is paid through the end of the month. It's small, it's loud, and it's unpolished, but it's a roof." "You want us to live there?" Vanessa stepped into the room, her eyes red and puffy. She looked at the keys like they were a venomous snake. "It's better than the street," I said. "You told me I didn't fit the aesthetic of your life, Vanessa. Well, now you're going to experience mine. Hard work, cramped spaces, and the reality of paying your own way. I'm taking the house back. I'm turning it into a corporate retreat for my firm. Your golden child days are over." "I hate you," she whispered, the venom still there, though the power was gone. "I know," I replied, walking toward the door. "But for the first time in 28 years, I don't care. The moving trucks will be here in an hour. Anything left on the curb goes to Goodwill." As I walked out onto the porch, I felt the breeze coming off the marsh. It was hot, it was humid, and it was beautiful. I took a deep breath of the air that I finally owned. The Sterling Manor was just a building again, and I was finally the architect of my own life. The silence at 42 Shadow Creek was no longer heavy or suffocating. It was crystalline. A week had passed since the sheriff served the papers and the Vance empire retreated like a tide, leaving behind nothing but the wreckage of a social climber's vanity. I spent the morning on the back patio, watching a red-tailed hawk circle the marsh, sipping a coffee that finally didn't taste like resentment. My phone buzzed on the iron table. It was a text from Marcus. Just got word from the dockside precinct. Your sister tried to report the theft of the designer china. The officer told her that since the items were purchased with funds traced to your accounts, she'd be better off filing a change of address form than a police report. They're officially moved in. God help the neighbors. I didn't laugh. There was no joy in envisioning Eleanor and Vanessa in that 400 square foot studio. I knew the smell of that place, the lingering scent of industrial grease from the nearby shipyards, and the constant rhythmic thrum of the night shift cranes. It was a place for people trying to build something from nothing, not for people who thought nothing was beneath them. Around noon, I decided to drive into the city. I needed to sign the final paperwork to convert the manor into the Sterling Engineering Retreat. As I drove through the historic district, the Spanish moss swaying in the breeze felt like a curtain closing on a very long, very bad play. I was stopping for a light when I saw her, Vanessa. She was standing outside a mid-range bridal boutique, not the high-end atelier where she'd bought her gown, but a place that specialized in budget-friendly, off-the-rack samples. She was holding a garment bag, her shoulders slumped, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail that Eleanor would have deemed tragic. She looked like a regular person. For a miller, that was the ultimate defeat. I pulled over. I shouldn't have, but the habit of being the dependable one was a hard ghost to exercise. I rolled down the window. "Vanessa," I called out. She flinched, then turned. When she saw the truck, her face went through a rapid-fire sequence of emotions: rage, humiliation, and finally, a hollow kind of exhaustion. She walked over, the garment bag dragging slightly on the sidewalk. "Come to gloat, Silas? Come to see the aesthetic of my new life?" she asked, her voice rasping. "I came to see if you needed a ride," I said quietly. "That apartment is a 3-mile walk from here, and the bus line is unreliable." She looked at the passenger seat, then back at the boutique. "I just sold my dress back to them, for 10 cents on the dollar. Preston's father sent a bill for the emotional damages his family suffered. Mom she's not doing well, Silas. She spent the whole morning trying to call the country club to tell them it was all a misunderstanding. They blocked her number." "Get in, Vanessa," I said. She climbed in, the scent of her expensive, fading perfume filling the cab, clashing with the smell of my work gear. We drove in silence for a while, crossing the tracks into the industrial zone. "Preston called me last night," she whispered, staring out the window at the rusted shipping containers. "He said if I signed a non-disclosure agreement promising never to mention the Vance name again, his father might consider paying off our credit card debt. He sounded like a stranger, Silas, like I was just a bad line item on a spreadsheet." "He was always a stranger, Vanessa," I replied, keeping my eyes on the road. "You just loved the spreadsheet." We pulled up to the dockside apartment. The building was a brutalist block of concrete, painted a depressing shade of beige. A group of welders in stained jumpsuits were leaning against the brick wall, smoking and laughing. Vanessa looked at them with terror. The kind of terror a person has when they realize they're no longer the one looking down. "I can't do this," she sobbed, clutching the garment bag. "I don't know how to be this." "You start by carrying your own bags," I told her, my voice firm but not cruel. "And then you get a job." There's a firm 3 blocks away looking for a receptionist. It pays $16 an hour. It's not a Vance wedding, but it's a paycheck." She looked at me, her eyes red and puffy. "Why are you even talking to me? I kicked you out. I told you that you were nothing." "Because I know what it's like to be at the bottom," I said, putting the truck in park. "The difference is, I built a ladder. You're still waiting for an elevator that's never coming back." She got out, her movements heavy. She didn't say thank you, but as she walked toward the narrow stairs of the apartment complex, she didn't look back either. She was carrying her own bag. I drove back toward the manor, the sun setting behind the marshes, casting long purple shadows over the low country. When I walked through the front doors of Shadow Creek, the air was cool and the house was quiet. I went to the kitchen and grabbed a beer. I sat at the island, the one Eleanor had insisted was only for hors d'oeuvres, and make laptopper. I had an engineering project to finish, a firm to run, and a life that was finally, unequivocally, mine. The Millers were gone. The Vances were a bitter memory. I looked around the empty, beautiful house and realized that I didn't need the aesthetic of a mansion to be a winner. I just needed the keys. I closed the laptop, finished my drink, and headed upstairs. Tomorrow, the renovation crews would arrive to turn this place into something useful, something real. I was Silas Miller. I was an engineer. And for the first time in my life, I was finally home.